here in the Glasgow University Union. It is my honour to welcome you all to the Union's prestigious debates chamber for our Freshers' Week show debate. Before we begin, I would like to thank my lovely show debates team, Sarah McGee and Jamie Ghosh, for all their hard work in organising this event for all of us. I would also like to thank my debates committee for all their hard work throughout Freshers' Week. And I please also get a warm welcome for all our speakers this evening in tonight's debate. Now, the motion before the House for the GU Freshers' Week show debate 2025 is "This House supports Irish reunification." To open the case for side government, I would like to welcome Bronagh Hughes. In 2019 to 2021 academic years. In parliamentary debating, she was the leader of the SNA, and she also represented the Union at the World University Debating Championships in Thailand in 2020. She now works at the blood cancer charity DKMS, the world's largest stem cell registry. Originally from County Down, Bronagh is an exceptionally proud Irish woman, and in this chamber, she is known as the Right Honourable Best Foot Forward.
Well, I'm glad to be here today, particularly as I believe the only speaker who is from the north of Ireland. And I'll tell you why that's particularly important. I was born in 1998. Right as the Good Friday Agreement was being written into our laws, I came screaming into existence and about half a month ago. We have then, in my 27 years of life, had 27 years of relative peace. 27 years for the new Northern Ireland to prove itself. And what have we seen so far? Well, it doesn't work. Partition came to our island 104 years ago, down the barrel of a British gun. And not one day of those 100 years has it ever served its people. For 45 years, it was an oppressive apartheid statelet, as its founder said, a Protestant state for a Protestant people. Irish Catholics, like my own family, had no jobs, no votes, no housing. For 30 years then, it was in a state of active conflict. Bombs, guns, huge violence, lives like those of my parents eked out beneath the stench of death. And then, peace. And after that, what came? 25 years, and I apologise, of fuck all. I grew up there, I can tell you. Compared to Britain and compared to the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland underperforms in every way that matters. The economy is weaker, jobs are harder to come by and they're worse paid, the health system is crumbling, waiting times are longer, outcomes are worse, domestic abuse is much higher, 50% higher than what we see here in Scotland, mental health outcomes are disastrous, suicides consistently the highest in the region, 93% of secondary school students remain in segregated schools, and sectarianism is still a huge issue, as is sectarian violence. I'll be talking about all this in abstract terms, but for me this is not abstract. These are my friends, my family, my community. Northern Ireland has failed everyone living under it from the very day it was founded. A Protestant state for a Protestant people, but when you look at the numbers, few have been failed quite so dramatically by Northern Ireland as the Protestant working class. So who is this supposed to serve? And if you look at how the Protestants have performed in the Republic, they're doing very well. Heather Humphreys is leading the polls in the Irish presidential election just right on. So it's been 100 years, and it's time to admit the partition that Northern Ireland is little more than a failed experiment. It's an aberration, it's a blip in history, and it's time to let it go. Northern Ireland is a place that people leave. It's a place that they run away from. A study in 2023 found that half of all young people intended to leave by the time they were in their early 20s. And I was that young person. I ran away to Glasgow at the first chance I got when I was 18. And it was only when I came here that I really met people from a unionist background who were from the north. I actually remember a certain assistant honorary secretary of the GU at the time stating a tricolour at front flat. And a funny thing happens to those unionist young people whenever they move here. They become Irish. And you'll meet them here too, young people from unionist backgrounds who, when they're free of the disdain their communities hold for Northern Catholics, suddenly discover that Ireland belongs to them as much as it belongs to anyone. And here in Britain, you will meet those young people. You'll meet them here in Glasgow, you'll meet them at Irish language classes, you'll meet them at Irish music sessions, you'll meet them at kneecap gigs, and I'm sure that you'll meet a few of them up in Kitty O'Shea's. Irishness represents hope, something that in the north is fairly scarce, where it often feels like nothing will ever get better. And I speak to young Irish people from the north living all over the world, and we agree on one thing, which is the day a border poll is called is the day you move home. I would consider it the greatest honour of my life to be able to go back and help shift the shadow of partition from Ireland and to allow us to be free and for things to get better, finally. And all evidence indicates that Ireland's north and south would benefit from reunification. But partition creates, for both, a periphery status. People say that Northern Ireland's expensive. It's an economic disaster. But that is itself a symptom of partition. Those 6 counties are not economically viable. Of course they aren't. It's a tiny portion of the historical nation of Ireland that is its major interest over time have primarily been exploiting its minorities and blowing itself up. So on one small island we have 2 currencies, we have 2 bureaucratic systems, we have competition between 2 economic development agencies, we have 2 sets of infrastructure bodies building everything from electricity networks to hospitals, and we have competition for foreign direct investment. So the whole thing is a disaster. It limits opportunity and economic potential, especially in the north. Our brothers in the Republic have their economic issues, but at least some control of their destiny has allowed them to become a modern European economy while the north remains a basket case. I'll take your point for Scanlan.
How effective do you think the Dáil is going to be when it has way more control from Sinn Féin and the DP?
Well, I think that's dismissive of the fact that those people have a right to a say within Ireland. I think Ulster Unionists are Irish in the same way that I am, and I think that their position within the Dáil is perfectly valid. So last year there was a massive joint study, the first one that had been done in 10 years by Dublin City University and Ulster University. And it found that any financial burden from partition would be entirely erased within 10 years. All modelling shows that economic growth of unification would outstrip the costs incredibly quickly, especially when you compare it to things like East and West Germany. And in fact, one of the biggest costs would be increasing the pay for former Northern Ireland public sector workers so that it is in line with the Republic. So one of the greatest costs of reunification would be in the north, giving our teachers, our nurses, our doctors a fair wage at last. And in a united Ireland, we would soon be able to afford it. And I would like to see any sort of solutions from a unionist perspective. Partition is a scar that runs along the island of Ireland. And maybe it's more like an open wound. The wounds inflicted by partition on the people of Ireland can never be healed by an Ireland that remains divided. The violent division of my country by the British state has had a ripple effect through my life, through the life of my parents, my grandparents. British jurisdiction over Ireland can never be the framework to heal those crimes. We see that everywhere from our economy to our justice system. Literally today, there's a British soldier who's been dragged back to Belfast in the 70s to face trial for murdering civil rights protesters in the streets of Derry on Bloody Sunday more than 50 years ago. That is not British justice. And in the words of Bloody Sunday families, there is no British justice, not in Ireland. The experiment of partition has failed. There was a long and storied Irish history before partition, and please God, one day soon, there will be a history after. And the history books will scarcely remember Northern Ireland, and the people of Ireland will live, finally, for themselves.
I would like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. To open the case for side opposition, I'd like to welcome Sir Vince Cable. Sir Vince Cable is the leader of Liberal Democrats from 2017 to 2019 and the Secretary of State for Business from 2010 to 2015. During his time as leader, he was highly critical of the effects of Brexit on causing friction in Northern Ireland. He attended the University of Glasgow as a PhD student and lecturer in economics, and was previously president of the Cambridge Union.
Thank you for inviting me to speak. Actually, thank you for inviting me back. It has taken me 60 years, but I'm grateful for the invite. And I'd like to applaud the speech from the government side. It was emotionally very powerful. And if we were deciding this issue on the basis of our hearts rather than our heads, I'd probably be over there, but we're not. I just want to emphasize that on this side, we're not arguing unionism. I encountered it when I first became an MP because I used to sit next to the Reverend Ian Casewell, who used to, read aloud from the Bible in debates and used to educate us on the evils of Barbary. But he was actually better than some of the others who thought that the world was created in 4004 BC. So we're not into unionism. Nor, given the introductory speech, I would justify partition. I mean, the world would be a better place if Ireland, and for that matter, India and Palestine, had never been partitioned. But we are where we are. And the reality of the situation is that we've got a Northern Ireland which is seriously divided by loyalties of faith, but is also primarily at peace. And the issue is why we would want to overturn that for a constitutional upheaval. And the central principle here is consent. In order to have a border poll, there has to be clear evidence that the majority in Northern Ireland want to have a vote. And the evidence is that they don't. The latest survey has 48% for the status quo, 40% for unification. And that's the most generous one. The Irish Times did a big survey last year. The differential was 48 to 34. And there are two key statistics that lie behind it. One is that amongst the unionists, support for remaining in the UK is about 80%, and it hasn't budged despite all the arguments. The other key statistic is that large numbers of nationalists continue to support membership of the United Kingdom. And they do that for very good reason. It's an entirely rational response because Northern Ireland, in many respects, has the best of all possible worlds. They're part of the UK, they can sell into the UK market, they benefit from all the arms contracts that are now coming through NATO reunification, they enjoy the National Health Service, but they also enjoy the benefits of being part of the European Union because the European single market effectively applies in Northern Ireland. And if you're born in Northern Ireland, you get an Irish passport, you can travel around Europe, unlike Scots and English people, you have the privilege of effectively being part of Europe. So they're part of Europe, they're part of the UK. Why would any rational person want to overthrow that? The other side of the equation is what the people in Ireland think about it. And certainly the sentiment is for unification. But you have to ask the question is why the two major parties in Ireland, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, neither of them are battering on the door for Irish unification. And there's a very simple, rational reason, is that the cost to Ireland of doing it would be astronomical. There's a big differential in living standards between the north, which is relatively poor, and the south, which is now significantly more economically successful. I've taken it to the point.
It's really expensive for me to get my lashes, hair, and nails done. But I look good, so it's probably still worth it.
Let me just develop that point. Ireland has been growing to about 3% a year since the turn of the century in Northern Ireland. It will have to be subsidised. The British subsidy will be transferred onto the Irish. The economic studies have shown that it will cost something like 8 to 20 billion euros for Ireland to take on unification. They have no appetite for doing it. So why are we having this argument? We're having it essentially because of an emotional spasm about nationalism. And nationalism is fundamentally an ugly emotion. You know, we've seen it on the streets of England in the last 2 weeks. Why should we rip up a status quo which provides peace and stability in Northern Ireland for an emotional reaction through a debate that will have the paramilitaries out on the street and reopen all the old vicious violent arguments about Ireland? So we've got a satisfactory status quo. It's not ideal, but let's keep it and avoid a return to the violence of the past. Thank you.
Iris Duane. 30 under 30 women by the Young Women's Movement and is a former vice president of the Student Support for the Students' Representative Council here at the University of Glasgow. She stood as the Scottish Greens Party candidate in Glasgow North in 2024 in the general election and ran for candidacy in Holyrood and is planning to run for candidacy in Holyrood in 2026. In this chamber, she is known as the Honourable Dragon Slayer.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, honourable and right honourable members in the chamber and my glorious friends here today in the gallery. It's an honour to once again stand before you in the very chamber where I first cut my political teeth. Not only in the months preceding our spectacular 140th anniversary here in Glasgow University Union, but on the precipice of our ancient university's 575th birthday, a prestigious occasion that calls for much celebration. For those of you in the chamber who do not know me, while I certainly do a lot of speaking, mathematical equations are too often not a matter I concern myself with. Yet I, in my very limited wisdom, can recognise that is a monumentally large number. 25 more than 550, 25 less than 575, to do a little bit of quick maths. Now, this is not simply an excuse for me to demonstrate my clearly assessed knowledge of our numerical system, but rather an exercise in the power and consistency of change, as guaranteed as the sun is to rise tomorrow. In the 574 years that this university has been accepting students, the nation of Ireland has been subject to the push and pull of forces out with her control. From crown domination to colony, to free state and partition, to republic, and most recently, an artificial border that almost nobody asked for, it is clear so many voices are not being factored into the Irish equation. As much as today we will hear arguments about the importance of staying united, and certainly many of us in this chamber seem to long for it in some form or another, I'm not entirely convinced we have ever had it. The North of Ireland has consistently lagged behind the United Kingdom economy. The infrastructure unable to be integrated with the rest of Ireland while facing a democratic deficit often caused by ourselves. Meanwhile, Westminster turned her back. Wherein the people of the North exercised their democratic rights that we have too often denied them and fought to remain in Europe, the English and Welsh denied her, choosing to push her both away from the continent and ourselves. That does not sound like unity to me. Alas, I'm sure all the honourable members are tired of me harkening on about the past, when ultimately we fight to chart a path for the future. And though I'm sure we will disagree on the reasoning as to why, it has never been clearer than ever that the fiction of a united kingdom has begun to collapse. Whether it is the ever-polarising movements the honourable member mentioned in our streets, defining who it is and what it means to be British, or, if the polls are to be believed, in little than less than a year from now, all of our devolved nations will be led by governments who have seen themselves not just involved, but held hostage at the whims of the London bubble. This simply shan't do. As we now stare down the barrel of a seemingly inevitable exit from the European Court of Human Rights, in service of dying old age political parties, the very question of the Irish land border and the Good Friday Agreement once again hangs in the air. Partitioning one people across two states instead of recognising the trouble this may cause, instead of bringing our nations together, instead of possibly imagining a better world in which human rights are not under debate. Britain, as she always does, as she has done for the last hundreds of years, turns her back once again. Now, I certainly may not be a mathematician, but that does not sound like a fair deal. The decisions of the future of Ireland must always remain in Ireland. But let us be clear, this government recognises that reunification will not be easy, it shall not be quick, and it certainly shan't be seamless, but it's simply a goal we must be working towards. Though I recognise the irony of myself stood before this prestigious chamber as a daughter of the Empire, descended not just from the Irish, but the Dominican too, continuing the historical trend of picking and choosing how nations and states around me are to be structured, I continue to find it imperative to add my voice to the choir of individuals calling out for the self-determination of a people that have long since been forgotten by the states they are actually.
Well, like most people in Northern Ireland currently don't want to be part of the Republic as our first people pointed out. They understand how self-determination applies.
I'm sure, as the Honourable Member recognises, prior to the Brexit debate, 33% of British people wanted to leave the EU. I think we all found out in 2017 how that went. Reunification offers not a window to the past ills, not automatically a solution to the present ills, but rather an opportunity for Ireland to chart their own path forward. Not weighed down by a parliament that fails to recognise its own nations. An integrated one island economy, a path to unity in our communities, a recognition that the complexities of Irish identity do not hold her back from peace and understanding, a border that lays not in jeopardy or liable to change based on decisions made in a chamber hundreds of miles from the north of Ireland, filled with individuals who too often than not see it not as part of their state, but simply an afterthought in their grandiose schemes of reactionary politics. It is a simple answer to the equation of what it takes to deliver for our communities, what it takes to bring people power closest to the ground, what it takes to be true to the people of the Northern Ireland as they have not been answered. The art of making a nation takes time. It takes courage. It takes willpower. This government will not deny that. But this government remains of the opinion that we have dragged our feet for too long. But the question has already been answered. So, Deputy Speaker, Honourable and Right Honourable members in the Chamber, and my fantastic world changers friends here in the gallery, I began my speech lamenting on my failure to adopt mathematical principles. I shall end it with one simple equation, an equation that's older than all of the arguments I've previously laid out, an equation that underlines it all. At the end of it, 26 plus 6 equals one united Ireland. It's time we did give back the counties to who they belong to. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome Dr. Michael Scanlan. Dr. Scanlan is a lecturer in politics here at the University of Glasgow and is a co-convenor of Politics 1A and a co-convenor of an honours course in populism. He's a published author on Sinn Féin and Irish republicanism and a lifelong fan of Celtic FC. His research interests include populism, radical politics, and political identity.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome. A special hello to all the politics undergraduates in the gallery who's thinking about heckling you or who's going to be marking your essays. Right, today's a challenge for me. It's a challenge for me because my politics not bringing to speak against this. I identified with the socialist republicanism of James Connolly. My 15-year-old is a kneecap fan, thanks to me. When we're driving around a dreary Presbyterian suburb, we have sing songs together. Feel free to join in. We belt out the line. Chucky our lad, get the bricks out lad, a one-way ticket please. Thank you! My wife is from Derbyshire, a town with more England, a county with more England flags than Keir Starmer's boudoir. That's a bit sick in the back of my mouth there. Her granddad was, I kid you not, Grand Master of the Birmingham Masonic Lodge. She was an officer in the British Army, and thanks to me she's got a favourite Celtic player. I made her swap King and Country for Kyogo and Carlton Vickers. And when I was leaving this afternoon, I said, Kirsty, my dear, my beloved, she went, what? I said, what's your favourite red? She said, oh, men behind the wire, that's the deal. And politically, it's a challenge for me too, because colonialism is one of the most vicious ideologies. Controversial as it may be to see that. Mind you, here we are in 2025 and everything is controversial. If you were to say fascism is a bad thing, someone known fat and poisonous discourse of Fuentes would say, oh, well, actually, shut it neck here, that is a bad thing. So is colonialism, just like Gaza. Anyway, where was it? Yes, the island of Ireland has suffered for centuries. There might be a song about that, 800 years, isn't it? Under English and then British colonialism, colonialism imposed hierarchies of ethnicity, which exploited people in language, dehumanised the Irish so much that when the willful starvation of hundreds of thousands of people shrugged off in the name of free trade, and the border, as the right honourable member over here said, which divides 6 counties from of the north and 26 of the south, is an ugly scar, which both reminds us of and perpetuates this colonial legacy. But I'm going to argue against unification, because I was asked to, but also because I believe this is absolutely not the time for it. And this is down to 2 factors, something called issue salience and the economic cost of constitutional change. Now, issue salience, for those of you who have not studied politics, or indeed for those of you who have but don't pay attention to lectures, which is, to be fair, a lot of you, is about how important an issue is to voters, how much it will influence them when you make your voting choices. For example, a lot of people in the UK would say they're in favour of proportional representation. It doesn't always translate into votes for Liberal Democrats. Sorry. That's because of issue salience. So if you look at opinion polling in the Republic, there's 60 to 65% of voters say, yeah, United Ireland, here we go, let's do it. But in the 2024 election, what were the big issues? It was the economy, it was the cost of living, and number 1 with the bullet, as per usual, housing. This is what voters care about, not constitutional matters. Go on.
So the point I was making is that the economies of most states suffer because of partition.
Uh-huh.
And we're not currently having that conversation about how that is an option for these very serious issues. So in instances where we are arguing about what we have in Ireland, why would that not then become a part of that savings?
And I'm going to get to that. Think of this as an overture. I mean, when you're at the opera and we're doing an overture, you're like, go on with it, bring the singers on. That's fair, I'm going to get to that. But it's also reflected by Sinn Féin in the Republic, the party of the United Ireland. The policies are primarily economic. They aim to address the housing crisis. Reunification's not even a major issue for the voters, if anyone wants to read any papers that I've written on it. When someone votes Sinn Féin in the South, it's not necessarily because of the dream of reunification, it's because they want jobs and houses. It is different north of the border, absolutely. Sinn Féin voters care more there about reunification. It's understandable because of the identity there. And border issues matter because of Brexit. But again, what is more important, what is more salient, is the economy, cost of living, NHS. And yes, as has been said by my colleague here, constitutional change costs money. I still look at my modest monthly wage slip and wonder where my Brexit bonus is. And ponder if instead of EU research funding I can use blue passports and flags to fund the research on business. The economic impact of this constitutional change hit hard and still hit this hard. And at a time when people on both sides of the illegitimate border are feeling economic hardship, struggling for jobs and affordable housing, and huge upheaval, the reunification cause is not worth it. And the voters know it. Reunification is a dream. Something for a future where there are jobs, where there are houses, there is security. Even if Sinn Féin argued that in the long term, 10 years was it, that it would lead to more prosperity, they also know in the short term that the economic pain at times we cannot afford it. So I'm going to put it to you that this is not the time for reunification. Politics is about priority. What's important? What's important in Island of Ireland is jobs, houses, security, not romantic notions. Even if the songs about these romantic notions are, to quote Mrs. Scanlan, absolute violence. And I hate to stand up here and be all Captain Killjoy from a Keir Starmer. Now stop the time. Because I believe in Irish reunification. I believe that our day will come. But not yet. And not for a while. So thank you. You're warm welcome. Thank you for inviting me. And remember 3 things. Trans rights are human rights, defend your right to protest, and free Palestine. Thank you.
I would like to thank that speaker for that fine speech, and to close the debate for side government, I'd like to welcome Hennie Vani. Hennie's from Somehow, in between her DJing, her dentistry degree, and her 3 to 4 different jobs, she has found time to fly to Glasgow on a Thursday for a freshers debate.
I think that introduction clearly shows that if you pay me enough money, I'm willing to do everything. I'll sell my soul to capitalism. First of all, I'd just like to say, I am so honored to speak here alongside some very important public figures and some real change makers. I'm sure the GUU had the intention of having some Irish people speak in this debate today. I'm sure they wanted us to provide an intellectual and profound perspective on tonight's debate. I'm assuming those people didn't show up because instead I am. As a college student who is on the brink of dropping out, I'm pursuing a DJ career. So, all I can say is, as a dental student, I can probably name every single tooth in your mouth and pick a favorite and a least favorite, but I'm not sure I'm quite a political expert, so I think I'm just going to talk about the things that are important, and I think that comes along the ideas of like being iconic, basically, and that's what I'm just going to talk about today. Firstly, I want to begin this speech off with a quote. This should be very recognizable. Where there is desire, there is going to be a flame. And where there is a flame, someone's bound to get burnt. But just because it burns, doesn't mean you're going to die. You got to get up and try, and try. So, this is obviously from a Pink song, but this is from Peak Pink. I'm talking 2010. Highlight of career Pink, so this is literally why. This just goes to say, look, obviously it's not going to be easy to have reunification, so I don't think it's fair for opposition to be like, oh, but this is going to be really hard to do, and this is going to be really difficult and stuff like that. Like, obviously it's not going to be easy. I'm not sure why that's really a good reason, but I think if Pink says you just got to keep trying, we're happy to do that. But more importantly, no, Ziyad, I don't want to talk to you. And one of my 3/4 jobs being a bartender, I'm going to tell you something really important that should be debated. And I call it the Guinness thing. Ireland is quite like a pint of Guinness. Now listen up, because I'm a bartender, so I know exactly how to pull a pint. What you do is, you tilt the glass to a 45-degree angle. You pull down the pint, and the Guinness starts flowing. But once the glass is about 3/4 full, you turn off the tap, and you put it down, and you leave it flat to settle. After some time, you take back that 3/4 full pint and you fill it up to the top and you make it whole again. What opposition stands for is serving a customer. That pint, that 3/4 pint, that's a pint. I don't know the measurements, but it's probably only 400 milliliters instead of whatever pint. Basically, obviously opposition is right because you have to serve the full pint. Obviously, you don't give it to the customer immediately. You gotta let it settle for a bit of time. So just let Ireland settle, let the North settle. But after some time, you must reunify and you must complete the pint. Because all I can tell you is Ireland is a pint of Guinness. So this is simply just really correct. Okay, now, I want to do something called rebuttal. I'm sure there's some freshers here. This is when you kind of just like listen to what the other side said, or you pretend you listen, right? And you just go like, I'm gonna argue against what they said because I didn't like what they said. Actually, no, I think they brought some good points, but I'm going to do it anyway. Cool. 2 important things that they said. First thing, they say, but like, people maybe want to be British. Okay, this was said in a nice way. It was said with consent and stuff like that. But that makes it sound really smart, and it's then going to be hard to believe. Anyway, basically, they just said, but maybe people don't want to be British. But they didn't listen to, like, my people on the government bench right here when we said, but some people want to be Irish. So this means some people want to be Irish and some people want to be British. So what can we do? I'm going to tell you, nobody knows what they really want. Why is this the case? Firstly, I always wanted to move to New York City, but when I saw the gory size of the rats in the subway on my For You page, my mind completely changed. Nobody knows what they really want. I thought I desperately wanted a boyfriend at Christmas time when I saw people in matching PJs, but then I realized I have to spend every day with him and respond to his text messages and can't get with anybody else. I didn't really want Secondly, they said money makes no girl. They said it's going to be really expensive to do. In my very clever POI, a lot of you didn't really get it. nails done. But no! It is so expensive for me to get my hair and my lashes and my nails done all the time. It's why I work so many jobs. But I'll tell you, it's so worth it when everyone says I look like a baddie all the time. I think it's going to be worth it if you spend this money. I think everything is expensive anyway. We may as well just have some fun while we're wasting our money now. Some more reasons why I think that we should support the reunification. I think, firstly, it is significantly way less likely that me and other Irish people are going to be called British. I'll take you in a second. Let me land here. Let me cook. Basically, people don't really understand that there's certain counties and parts and cities of Ireland that either are or aren't in the north or in the south. So if you say you're from Ireland, they're just going to think that it's part of the UK, and it's really annoying. But I think if we reunify, it's really clear. This whole island is Ireland, and this whole island is not Ireland. That is the UK. That is Britain. I think even Americans would be able to understand this, and people wouldn't call me British every single day.
Well, I will give you €30 if you can name the 6 counties of Northern Ireland.
Okay.
I can do
You
it.
got me there. Let's go. Tyrone. Whoop. Derry. Armagh.
Fat guy.
Fermanagh.
Fat guy.
Antrim, and down. Let's go. I've already explained how it's going to be extremely iconic, but also I think our slogan sounds iconic. 26 plus 6 equals 1 sounds, dare I say, punty. What is 26 plus 6 equals 32? That sounds like math. That's kind of Oh, I don't know. Anyway, look, all this is simply just to say, I think that you should vote for the side that is simply more iconic and cunty. I don't know what consent and money is. Actually, I don't know what money is. Anyway, guys, vote for government. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. To close the debate for side opposition and the debate as a whole, I'd like to welcome Ziyad Anwar. Historical Society, Ziyad carries an impressive reputation in his chamber. He was a quarter-finalist at the Copenhagen European Debate Championships in 2025. He broke at Oxford IB and has already had massive success in Scotland, being the champion and second best speaker at Head Clerk 2024. I'd like to welcome to the chamber the Honourable Ramadan.
There's apparently like a formal introduction you're meant to start with. Nobody gave it to me, so like it's great to be here. It's an honor to stand here speaking in this chamber as the only member of the opposition team with a full head of hair for now. I'm not a politics, right? But I was born in Ireland to Pakistani parents, so like I have some experience understanding British life and their effect on stuff. My honourable name, Ramadan, is Irish for idiot. Ramadan is a month in Islamic calendar. It's very fun. But more importantly, I consume a lot of love triangle related media, and when you think about it, Northern Ireland is a love triangle, right? Because the Republic is Conrad, the UK is Jeremiah. For full disclosure, I've never seen that show, but that's what people are talking about. PETA is the UK, Gale is the Republic, Captain is Northern Ireland, or Ozempic is the United Kingdom, Manjaro is the Republic, and Hennie's mom is Northern Ireland. Well, I think what we ought to know about love triangles is if you're in the position of Northern Ireland, and you've already committed to one, you're in a stable relationship with one, they're sending you billions of pounds every year to like keep everything up and make sure you have access to the NHS and it's already stable, it probably doesn't make much sense for you to burn it down to the ground and chase the other person. But more importantly, if you are the other person in this situation, it doesn't make sense for you to enter a relationship with someone when that person clearly has else on their mind. I'm not speaking from experience, I promise. And so the problem becomes at the point where even if the majority of people in Northern Ireland want to rejoin the Republic, maybe it's 55%. It's not, they've all lied, it's less than 50%, so their self-determination stuff is nonsense. The problem is that there is a large chunk of the population that doesn't want to join, and they are still committed to being part of the United Kingdom, and they burn massive bonfires every year with tricolors as parts of that. I think it's crazy for you to want them to join your country. I think this is bad for the Republic as a whole. What does the first speaker say? I'm also going to do a rebuttal, but I'm going to do it better than her. So they say that Northern Ireland kind of sucks and it would be better if they joined the Republic. And there's a few things I want to point out, right? In Ireland, you don't have free point-of-care access to GPs. In Northern Ireland, you do. And in Northern Ireland, even though you have the same electricity grid, energy costs are actually cheaper because of various tax policies that exist in the Republic. But the most important thing of all is that the Republic, for some stupid fucking reason, has minimum unit pricing, and so pints are like €3 more expensive than they are in Northern Ireland. We have to drive up to Newry every like 3 weeks to get access to wine for our society event. If the Republic joins Northern Ireland, we can't do that anymore. So our societies collapse, because the only way to get people to join is with free alcohol.
Pricing was the honourable member except that Scotland was immediately the UK.
Oh yeah, sure, sorry, yeah, I live in the UK, I don't give a shit. Like, Scotland, Mupp S&P, etc., whatever. Anyway, in terms of like the argumentation, she says that there's competition between the North of Ireland and the Republic, and so they can't get the investment. And so this doesn't make sense, because if you think about it, the reason why the Republic gets investment is because we had like centre-right governments in power for a long period of time who did these fun things like lower corporate tax and make it easier to invest. This is all very boring, I'm very sorry, but it's necessary for us to understand why this argument doesn't make sense. The problem is that if the North joins the Republic of Ireland, the people who vote for Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland are going to continue to vote for Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland. So you said that bunch of the Sinn Féin representatives to the Dáil, and you know what Sinn Féin love doing? What does Sinn Féin love doing?
Well, I disagree with your premise.
That's not what Sinn Féin is doing.
I don't believe that United Ireland is the Republic of Ireland with the North stuck on. What we're doing is creating a new state from the ground up. And if we want to decide pints of free, we can decide that.
Yeah, and it's like if all rain, unicorns, and rainbows, then I would support like a one-world government as well. But unfortunately, we have to make it in the real world. And in the real world, the Republic will impose their policies on that because they like their tax revenue, which is by pints are going to be expensive. Anyway, what was I saying? Something about Sinn Féin being communist. Yes. So the problem is that Sinn Féin are going to enter government. They probably won't because they still won't have a majority, but they'll be the largest political party. And they're relatively populist, relatively left-wing. And so they're going to undo the stuff that allowed all the investment that the Honourable Speaker mentioned. And the problem is that Republic of Ireland was not competing with Northern Ireland. They were competing with everyone else in the world who could possibly access this investment. And so as a result, we lose all that investment, so it becomes worse in the Republic. But even if you ignore that, because realistically Sinn Féin won't have a majority team, the problem is that every other small left-wing political party in Ireland hates Sinn Féin to the core, because they all, rightly or wrongly, associate them with the IRA's activity. So the Labour is unlikely to go into coalition with them. The Greens are unlikely to go into coalition with them. Some Dems are unlikely to go into coalition with them. But the problem is you're also sending a bunch of DUP representatives down as well. So you're just not going to get coalitions formed. You're not going to have government passing any policies. To be clear, maybe the North might be slightly better off. But it comes at the expense of the Republic, and that's where I'm from. Let's say more about that. Cool. The second speaker, they just had like a bunch of vague allusions, and like they sounded really nice without saying anything of substance, which explains why they stood for the Green. Cool. The third speaker said some fun things. But I think the most interesting thing they talked about is this idea that preferences don't exist. And she catches herself at the end, right? Because she does that thing where she's like, consent doesn't exist, and then she realizes she says that, that's really stupid. But that's the problem, right? If you argue from a position that preferences don't exist, that means we can't defer to anything ever. And so I would posit that maybe some practices are silly and fake, but a lot of times, if people are doing things that suggest that they hold these practices deeply, like burning effigies because they really don't like a group of people, I would posit that their preference of not wanting to be part of a state with these people is maybe something that they actually do hold deeply. Ultimately, I don't understand why we want to form a country with people who hate our guts. I think the idea that it's likely to succeed is incredibly silly for all these reasons proposed.
To all speakers, it was an amazing debate. We'll now move into a round of audience questions. You can just raise your hand, I'll call on you. Who wants to start? No questions. You have B, Ziyad, Anwar. You have no questions. Yes?
Questions for the organization. Shouting or leaders?
Was he not here when I shouted more than the hoops? No. Fair enough, but I mean, it was bold to assume that there's political instability in the Republic as well. I get where you're coming from. You can DUP a party who are not entirely sure to believe in dinosaurs. But, no, I mean, there has been instability on both sides of the border. Now, I think, arguably, what you might mean in the North of Ireland is not so much instability rather than just absolute breakdown, just government not working. Possibly, yes. Who knows? But it's a big risk. I'm not sure you can afford it. Got to hate myself.
Are you going to keep kicking it down the road? It's very striking that the people in Northern Ireland who now want a border poll are actually the hardline unionists because they know they would win and then they could kick the problem down the road forever. So let's stick with the principle that there should be a border poll if the majority of people in Northern Ireland are shown as wanting one. But we can't get away from the basic point that you've got to have consent. And if you don't have consent, there's no point continuing to push these.
Question to the opposition. If the question is about representation, how can you argue that the DUP are effectively representing the people in the Westminster Parliament compared to that?
I mean, they're not effectively represented anyway. The problem is, the people who vote for the DUP are going to vote for the DUP even in United Ireland, and now we have to deal with the DUP as a dog instead of being confined in party of Stormont, which is just not very useful for us.
And to be fair, the dog's a basket case as it is.
Yeah, but then the dog is not particularly great at being stable or forming a long-lasting coalition.
The dog doesn't currently have ethically divided parties.
Correct. It's like defaulting together.
Why would that be the case?
So things can be bad, and then they can get worse. And so my thesis is that it gets worse.
Yeah.
Is that not what democracy is about? About having the same people from the same land
So for the DUP and the loyalist voters that would let vote for them say they would let these, that's descriptive representation. Substantive representation is different. This is when they act for it. Okay? So for example, if you were, you know, back in the 80s, you're women, you could say Margaret Thatcher is descriptive representation. Was it substantive representation? Well, if you don't know, go for your brand. Okay? Hold the phone far away from your answer. So it's true that the DUP provide descriptive representation to the regions in Northern Ireland. Do they provide substantive representation? That's for them to decide, but I would say probably not.
In this debate, we have already talked about Northern Irish people, but doesn't it say that not find it selfish that in these types of referendums, like the independent referendum in Scotland, and for people who want to be unified with Ireland, not think it's selfish that we're not asking the entire UK to vote, considering it affects everyone.
I don't care what English people think. I don't agree that in the long term a United Ireland would have like higher housing expenses. You know, the most recent sort of major economic study has shown that it would actually benefit both entities in the medium term, not in the really long term. And for the reasons that we laid out, we have these two systems that are sort of not working each other. Absolutely, it's an issue in the Republic that young people are emigrating. It's a slightly bigger issue in Northern Ireland, and listen, people from the north are going to Australia as well. Ask everyone I went to school with. But yeah, in the long term, obviously, yeah, you know, young people leave Ireland in their 20s. This has been the case for a very long time. That's because it's a difficult place to be a young person to make money. That is north and south. I think what we need to build is somewhere people can come back to. You know, that people can kind of go away and sort of have their careers and then come home. You know, because I wasn't joking whenever I say that I talk a lot to friends and family all around the world about, you know, when do you go home, at what point do you go home, and the point of the border war is always that thing of like, well, of course, you know, in that world, that's when you go home, that's whenever you fight to make it better, because there's so little hope now, you know, especially in the north. You know, I don't know how things are ever meant to get better as they are, but I know that, yeah, in the instance that we have United Ireland, that is the first instance in which it gives young people a chance to have something to build and something to come back to. Today were nationalist in a traditional sense. I definitely disagree that they're sectarian. It was a point that I made that I think actually some of the people who have been most failed by the creation of the Northern Irish state is working class Protestant communities. And I think that they're as welcome in a United Ireland as I am, and I want to see an Ireland that is better and that works for them as much as it works for people from my own background and community.
because I was trying to mumble. I'm not doing mumble. So what it was about, so you're from Northern Ireland. Hello, hi, how are you? Alright, magic. So, and you were saying, that's going to be really hard. I think the argument that my colleagues put across, whether it should be or not, was that Northern Ireland currently has vegetable forests. You were saying over that? I'll sit down to deafening silence. Shame. By the way, you could literally power this building now if you were to attach a generator to my grand body spinning.
My question is for the government. There's a strong loyalist community to Northern Ireland today, and the violence that is caused by paramilitary groups of the IRA and the UDA. I think there's still a real risk that if there was a reunification between Northern Ireland and Ireland, it would be a risk of paramilitary groups, specifically loyalist paramilitary groups, fighting for the independence or to regain power from the United Kingdom. I think that would be, how would that be impacting risk that Ireland would be very?
I think it's a good question, but as I mentioned in our speeches, this isn't about bolting the north onto the current Republic of Ireland. This is about creating a new state that's welcome to all people in Ireland. As my Prime Minister has already said, Protestants will be just as welcome in the new United Ireland as the Catholic communities were. And we've got to go through a long process about how we're going to make that work. We wouldn't simply get rid of the border. I think the risk is just as similar here in the UK of that violence resparking. We saw hints of it potentially with the deals around Brexit, and again, as I mentioned in my speech, the withdrawal from the European Court of Human Rights puts the Good Friday Agreement back up to question, which may also spark some level of violence across communities. So it's complex, it will take time, but we're willing to take that time.
The opposition previously said that the desire for unification of Northern Ireland was not a majority of the public. However, during the 2014 Scottish referendum on independence, we saw an overwhelming increase in the support for Scottish independence due to the discourse created by the imminency of that referendum. As such, proving the polling could not be an accurate indication of the national will if said topic was considered to be raised to be by most citizens. Would you not agree that enabling an increase in such discourse would be seen in such that would be seen in such a case would allow us to gain more accurate insights into the views of Northern Irish, and not doing so was an issue of anti-imperial nationalist movements?
So I guess the problem with that realistically justify referendum and policy, right? Right, if your stance is the reason this policy is currently not popular is because you don't talk about it more, and it's unclear to me what policy is able to decide if popular or unpopular or not, or decide what to discuss. And so I think a reasonable metric is to either go off with the polling or to talk about what the impact would be of unification, which is what we broadly did. I think that's like, because like if you just say, really, the reason the polls are not because you don't talk about it enough, then polls just can't use them for anything ever. You can't actually use them for any public policy and any sort of like.
One more question. One more.
You mentioned earlier that there could possibly be drawn a link between support of Brexit pre-2016 and support of reunification now. Is it not important to also mention that Brexit is now widely being seen as a failure?
Is that for the government?
Yeah.
Brexit has widely been seen as a failure, but failure. But as we saw at the time of the referendum, there was a lot of hope put behind it. There are many reasons as to why individuals voted for Brexit, and I'm not here to discuss those. I think they are two very fundamentally different cases. One is about needing a larger trading bloc, and the other is about state formation. So whilst I think it shows the behaviour of individuals, as we just mentioned, of salience of issues, the actual issues themselves don't relate to each other.
Thank you for all your questions, and join me in thanking our speakers for what was a fantastic debate. GU Debating. We're one of the oldest and most prestigious debating societies in the world. We founded the World Debating Championships in 1980 and have gone on to win it more times than Harvard and Cambridge combined. However, what we are most proud of is being one of the most inclusive and accessible debating institutions in the world. Unlike Oxford, the GU and GU Debating are completely free to join. Should you ever go to represent us in a competition, your travel and accommodation will always be paid for by the union. In recent years, our debaters have gone to Vietnam, Denmark, the Netherlands, France, Panama, and more. Debating at the GU is an amazing opportunity that is truly open to anyone. If you want to join GU Debating, come find us at 6 p.m. every Tuesday in the Variety Library. When I joined in my first year, I had never done debating before, and now I get to sit in the fancy chair and wear the fancy robes. Furthermore, it is through the debating that the union has become my home. And even if debating isn't for you, this union will always have its doors open for you. And one day too, I hope you may call this place home. Now, as is tradition, the president of the Dialectic Society would normally give a speech to the chamber, but unfortunately, she's been having a little too much fun this freshman season. She very kindly asked me to remind you all that we have our final event of Freshers Week tomorrow in the reading room at 7:30, and that is the Debates Dialectic Launch Party. Now, as is Glasgow tradition, I would invite all of you in the gallery to yell, shout, bang on the wall, to vote for which side you believe has won the debate. So just shout and yell when I call the side. All those for side government. On behalf of the gallery, I declare the winner of the Freshers Week 2025 show debate to be side government.